I am an invisible man. No, I'm not a spook like one of those who haunted Edgar Allan Poe, nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms. I am a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids, and I might even be said to possess a mind. I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. Like the bodiless heads you see sometimes in a circus sideshow, it is as though I've been surrounded by mirrors of hard, distorting glass. When they approach me, they see only my surroundings, themselves or figments of their imagination. Indeed, everything and anything except me.
The first time I realized I was Black was in college. And I was dating a girl at the time. Her name was Jess. She was a white girl. And it was the first white girl I ever dated. I knew there was a bunch of stigmas, but she seemed cool. And I felt like I didn't have to be different around her like I do around other people. And I started asking questions about her family. And we talk about it, and she said that, I don't know if we should meet them. I don't know if we should talk about them. And one day she went home, and her parents were pretty into her life. They knew who she hung out with. And they asked her, "Do you like Kenny?" And it wasn't if we were dating. At this point, we were already dating for a couple months. She didn't want to tell him that. But they asked if she liked me. And she said nothing. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. And instantly, her mom started crying. Her dad said, "Are you not confident enough? Did we not raise you right?" He started mentioning if I was even a citizen, how it could affect her work status after college. And I think the biggest part that kind of hit home for me was they never even met me. They didn't take the time to meet me once. They never heard my voice, never asked me a question. But they already assumed so much about me. And my mom, my dad, my whole family, the way I was raised was to combat that stereotype, was to be someone who wouldn't be seen in that light. And the funny thing is, it didn't matter. None of it mattered, because the minute her parents saw my race, that's all they saw. And yeah, after a while, I kind of didn't want to be in a relationship with someone where I knew I could never have a connection with their family or things like that. And we broke it off. And I remember this one part was during graduation, I saw her and her family, and they knew exactly who I was. And they sat through the point where I walked across the stage just like she did. And they never looked at me once. And even when she was there, she had to like sneak out and sneak around to kind of say bye to me and give me a hug and things like that. So yeah, that's when I first realized I was Black.
I always knew that I was Black, or at least as far as my memory goes. As a child, people say things, you realize, but when I really realized what that meant was actually when I studied abroad. There weren't many Black people in Barcelona, and whenever there were, they were people who were either seen as prostitutes or people who were homeless. So every time people saw me, they assumed I was, one of those as well. And I was in a grocery store trying to buy groceries, like normal. And an older woman, very, very short, I didn't even know she was there, honestly. I had groceries on the belt. Lady was about to ring me up, and then all my stuff started moving. And so I didn't know why. I looked over, and there was a really, really short Spanish woman there who was just moving my stuff out of the way. And then she started to push me in the grocery line. And it felt like such a normal thing to try to do, right? To buy groceries and to mind your own business, go home, eat your food. And I didn't know that my skin color meant something that awful outside of the United States, because I had never really, interacted with people outside of the US. And the fact that she started pushing me, was pushing my stuff, and the woman who was ringing me up, actually, I didn't speak Catalan, which is the language that the woman spoke, and she had to tell her to stop, and the woman was cursing and yelling because I was trying to buy groceries. So that was when it really hit me that, hey, like wherever you go, whatever you do, your skin color is following you, and people are judging you and thinking things of you. This woman and I didn't even speak the same language, but my presence, me being there, just minding my business, doing what normal people do, offended her to the point where she felt she had to touch me. So that was rough. But I think that's the first time I really realized what my skin color, my blackness, my presence did to people.
The first time I realized I was Black, I was 5 years old. I was in kindergarten. I have never forgotten, will never forget the conversation I had with one of my other 5-year-old classmates. And I don't remember how she knew this, but she came up to me and said, "So your dad is Black, but your mom is white?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "That's impossible." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, that's impossible. That can't happen." And I've played that conversation over the years, including ways I could have responded. But how, as a 5-year-old, do you respond to essentially an existential question, right? A nullification of who you are and that you are able to exist. I didn't know how to answer her that day. I remember I was so embarrassed. I was so angry because of course I exist. Do I? Am I here? What do you mean? Is it wrong? Is it bad? And I've had conversations like that in different, maybe more subtle ways for my whole life.
The first time I realized I was Black, I feel like I always knew, but the first time that I felt the negative effects of being Black was actually on the campus of my HBCU, which is the last place I expected to ever feel like I was Black. I enjoyed my experience all the way up until my first semester of sophomore year, when I began to be extremely stressed just from schoolwork and left my dorm to drive myself to the hospital from having muscle spasms, and unfortunately had a muscle spasm in the back of the parking lot, which led to a minor accident with a gate. And when I went to turn around on the one-way street, I decided to get out of my car to check the damages and saw that there was a police officer, not campus police, pulling up behind me. Of course, I figured he was coming to help me. And so, distraught, I get out of my car, and the next thing I know, he pulls a gun out on me. And to this day, there's still no words to describe how terrified I was, and how unsafe I felt with a police officer that I thought was there to help me. Even after campus police came and insisted that I was a student and that I should be released, he refused. He said that I was his case and that he was taking me in. He handcuffed me and put me in the back of the car. And I felt like a criminal. I had done nothing wrong, and I stated to him over and over again that I was just trying to get to the hospital, and he did not care. That day changed my entire outlook on being Black and interacting with police officers. Most recently, after a Super Bowl party, we were pulled over for a broken tag light, and I cried. And I couldn't sleep that night because I feared for my life. And although I walked away with not even a ticket, that memory of having a gun pulled on me by a white officer will never leave my mind. And seeing the state of our country and police brutality always takes me back to that day, and how close I was to becoming a hashtag.
Yeah, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, a place that's predominantly Black. And when I got kicked out of school there, or rather when my mother and I moved across the bridge to Forest City, Arkansas, it was a slight shell shock. At a point when I was a junior in high school, I went to this event called Governor School. And it's a place where students who have done well come to spend a summer together and continue their learning. And it's supposed to be a pretty open space. I was one of 6 Black people. And I remember when I walked onto the campus and I started checking in, they looked at me sort of strange, like, are you actually supposed to be here? And the first couple of days, they treated me sort of weird because I felt as though I had to prove to them that I belonged there, that it wasn't a fluke that I was able to come to Governor School, that I was able to, hold my own with them, with people who are far richer than I am, or maybe are from a more affluent family. And so I think in that moment, I really understood what it meant to be the other, because in Memphis and in Forest City, for the most part, I was with just Black people. And it was pretty cool because I was always seeing myself. But then to be in that situation, it was like everyone had a secret club and I didn't know how to actually join it. And it kind of sucked, I think, because as a Black person, you don't think of like how different you are from other people, because you see yourself as almost the same. Like you want the same things. I wanted to be there. I wanted to succeed, just like everyone else there did. But it just sucks that I had to prove that I somehow belonged in order for them to embrace me.
The first time I realized I was Black was probably in 2nd grade when it became very tangible. I went to a school where my brother and I were the only 2 African Americans. It was a small Catholic school. And in 2nd grade, I had a girl come up to me. She was like one of the most popular girls in my class. And she started touching my hair without asking. And I didn't realize how weird that was at the time, but said, this is so interesting. I always thought that Black people's hair was really greasy and oily, but yours is okay. And I went home and I asked my mom what she was talking about, because I had absolutely no idea. I had never really had to think about how I was different. And that was the first time my mom had to explain that not every little girl had to sit and get perms every week or every month. Not everyone had to use hot combs, etc. So that was the first time it was really tangible to me that I was different in a way that people noticed and talked about.
Yeah, so it was right after I got my driver's license permit, to a full license, and I was driving home late one time from a party. It was totally fine. I wasn't drinking because I was driving and I lived far away from where all the parties were, just based off of how my whole high school situation was. But it was 2 in the morning or something, and I got pulled over by a police officer, just a mile away from my house. It was totally fine, but I texted my mom that I was just about a mile away from home, and I got pulled over because I think I just went too quickly through a red light when turning right. And so she was just freaking out and sent me this long, text about how I should be safe, present myself, keep my seatbelt on, always have everything ready to talk to the individual there, and just mention her name because she's a trustee of a town. And then when I got home, it was totally fine and didn't get a ticket or anything. She was just crying and so happy that I was home. And it was should have just been a standard, pulled over procedure, but it just was really emotionally taxing for my mom. And it was kind of one of the first moments I realized I have a different position in particular scenarios in this country because of my race.
The first time I realized I was Black would be when I was in kindergarten. I guess to preface this story, the kindergarten that I went to was in a more affluent community. My mom wanted me to have a better education, so she we lied a little bit about the address, and I ended up going to not as ethnically diverse kindergarten. So I was actually one of the only Black kids that was in the school, but this wasn't really something I noticed until a particular event, which I'm going to go into detail about. But in kindergarten, as we all remember, we all went to like, there's like an art class or like a music class. In this particular scenario, in music class, we were all like broken into groups, and we had to all pick a song that we wanted to sing. And they kind of assigned the songs to us, and then as a group we would like sing together, learn like the notes, and that was kind of like the purpose of the class. This being like the late 90s at the time, the most popular bands and artists were like NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. So the teacher gave us NSYNC, and then we started playing the song, and then and, you know, we all remember Bye 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 and all that good stuff. So I started trying to sing with the group, and all my friends were singing along with me. And the next thing you know, one kid turns around and looks at me and says, "David, why are you singing?" I'm like, "Oh, it's a good song. What are you talking about?" And the next thing you know, he says, "You're black." And it's a weird scenario kind of hearing that from a 5-year-old and being another 5-year-old, because it's not really something that was discussed or talked about. But as soon as he said that, the entire class, which was a majority of white people, just started laughing, including the teacher. And even the teacher told me, "David, you should probably sit this one out." The funny thing is that I'm also biracial, even though, you know, my father passed away when I was younger, so he hasn't been around, or he wasn't around at the time. But it wasn't something I really ever noticed or talked about. We're all just different colored people. You know, we're still all people at the end of the day. But at that moment, I realized, wow, I'm actually different. I was recognized for being different for something so trivial. And I think at that moment, and because I remember it so vividly today, that people, including kids, parents, notice you for the color of your skin sometimes, and not the other things that you bring to the table. And that was just kind of the first start, or the awakening to that experience, that I would feel probably for the rest of my life up until now.
The first time I realized I was black, it was actually in high school, about my sophomore or junior year. I had just gotten my first car from my parents. And I was in a city that, you know, I had grown accustomed to being around. I'd actually spent almost a decade at that point going to the schools there, both middle school and high school. And I got pulled over by a cop. When I was pulled over, I was, you know, started off pretty normal, got asked some of the basic questions. And then it kind of got weird to the aspect where the police officer said that he suspected that something may be in my car that may, you know, resemble marijuana or anything like that. And I know very well that I don't even smoke marijuana, something that I, you know, don't keep in the car, even if it was something that I did. And he asked me to get out. I was really confused, didn't really understand. And as I got out, he proceeded to frisk me, and then proceeded to even search my car. And I was just confused, because it's like, you know, this is the same city that I've been in for at least a decade, going to schools here. I'm like a half a mile from my high school, less than that from the middle school that I was previously attending, and maybe like around the corner from a friend of mine who I was going to see. From there, you know, he didn't find anything, but he decided to give me a ticket, claiming that there was a crack in my windshield that was obstructing my view. However, the crack was in the bottom right corner of the windshield. So there's, you know, no possible way that it can obstruct my view enough to make me get into an accident or cause anyone else harm. So overall, I just felt confused, slightly violated, and mainly just betrayed, you know, that I had, you know, basically been questioned about the validity of, you know, who I was as a citizen in somewhere that I had grown very comfortable with. So that was the first time I realized that I was black.
So the first time I realized I was black was back in high school. I went to this basketball camp in Connecticut. I think it was the summer before either my junior or sophomore year. It's my first time going to a camp. It was predominantly white, but I didn't really think too much of it to begin with, because I was there for basketball, and you know, that was my love at the time, so that kind of put the blinders on. But you know, to begin, it was really fun. I got to be really good friends with this one white girl. I can't remember her name, but it was a week-long program. We spent most of our time together, downtime anyhow. And I recall this one meeting, this one downtime we all had. She was there, and a bunch of our other friends that we made were around, and I think I needed something like some socks or something random, and I was asking if anyone had an extra pair, and this one white guy said, "Yeah, man, I have some in my room. You can go and get it." And the girl that I'd been friends with the whole time, she immediately stops and like, "No, no, you can't let him go into your room. Don't let him do that." And I'm like, "Why? What's wrong?" She said, "Oh, well, I'm from Texas and I hang out with a lot of black people, and trust me, he'll steal something out of your room." And immediately I was taken aback. I'm like, "Yo, this is the same girl that I've been hanging out with this whole time. We've been cool, but put me in a situation where I'm to be trusted, and the color of my skin makes it that I would be more likely to steal, or I would be, it, and like I said, I was there for the love of the game, but that immediately hit me, and I didn't break down or anything like that, but it just was one of those enlightening moments where like, man, my color of my skin will really affect all my opportunities, and no matter where I am, that's gonna follow me. So yeah, that was the first time that I realized I was black.
I was born in Cameroon. It's a country in West Africa. So I've always known that I'm black. The first time that I realized that it's not always seen as a good thing in this day and age was when I was pulled over in Baltimore City in Maryland. I was on my way to work in a minivan, and I worked for city schools at the time, doing IT. I'm in my uniform and everything, and I get pulled over for a taillight, which it was out, it's understandable. The officer asked me for my license and registration, give it to him right away. But then he goes to check my information, and he comes back and asks me, do I have any drugs or guns in the car? Now, believe it or not, my first instinct was to laugh, because I'm like, no, why would I have drugs or guns in the car? That's like, what did you see back there that would even make you come ask me that? So I thought he was joking, and I laughed a little bit, but he was that serious. So I told him, no, I don't have any drugs or guns. So then he asked me, can he search the car? And I'm like, at this point I'm getting angry. I'm like, no, why would you search the car? Like, what do you, I mean, I don't have tints on my, this is a minivan, I don't have tints, anything like that, but I guess he thought maybe there was something, So I told him no, and he tells me either I can, if I don't have anything to hide, what's the problem? We can either do the search, or I could wait for the dogs to come, get there. And really more out of annoyance than anything, because there was nothing in my car. I told him, go ahead and do the search. So he asked me to step out of the car. I stepped out, and the first thing that really bothered me at that point is he asked me to put my hands against the car, and he searches me and pats me down and everything. And I felt like a criminal. I felt violated, and it's crazy because I've never done anything wrong in my life with the law. I've never been in trouble like this. So he pats me down, and he goes and he checks the car, which is what I thought he would have been doing rather than checking me. And of course he finds nothing. And as he's searching the car, he asked me if one of my homies got shot, my homies, wouldn't I want them to find the shooter? And that was just such a loaded question that I asked him, does it have to be homies because I'm black? But that was that. At that point, I didn't feel like this was right. So once he finished, he was on his way. I asked him for his badge number, and he gives it to me, but then he tells me, he comes back and says, oh, and if you're gonna file a complaint, don't bother because nothing's gonna happen. And I mean, it just kind of opened my eyes. But I guess that's the first time that I really realized what it meant to be a black man in America.
So my story is kind of has two sides. It was the kind of the first time that I realized that I am black and, you know, this is my blackness. And then the second piece is more of like a, you know, this is when I realized that blackness is not whiteness, and that there's a distinction between sort of different races and blackness. When I first realized I was black, I was with my family. We went to the Million Family March, which was kind of a spin-off of the Million Man March. I must have been about, like, say, somewhere between like 4 and 5. And I was, you know, on my dad's shoulders for most of the time, and, you know, in this swarm of like super proud, super enthusiastic, just black families and black people. And I remember specifically walking home from the march. We were like walking to the train station and holding my parents' hands and just feeling like a sense of overwhelming pride and safety with blackness and with my people. And I think I first conceptualized what that community meant and felt like, and having a pride in who we are. And, you know, that a couple years later, maybe like 2 or 3 years later, I did a summer program in, it must have been in Maryland, and it was an academic program. It was like a summer camp, and we were learning about science and stuff. And I walked into the room, and I was only around white people. Like, I was the only black face I saw. And up until that point, I'd gone to elementary school with black people. Everybody I knew at my church was black. Literally, my whole circle was black. And it was the first time I've ever had to interact with peers that were white, and I didn't know how to handle that. I was in shock. And so I spent my first 2 days literally just like roaming around, like looking for another like friendly black face. And I found one other girl who was in the program and was black, and I literally walked up to her and said, "Hey, we're the only 2 black girls. We should stick together and hang out." And we were, you know, inseparable from then on. And I think, I don't know, I think it reminded me, or it was the first time I realized that, you know, hey, like, this is something different. This is something that, you know, I should actively seek out, or, you know, can become more comfortable after having seeking that out.